Sean, good evening.
How you doing, Ben?
Well, I'm doing fine here. I'm at home. Sean, you're in KYiV. This is a city that most people in the world have now heard of. They've learned how to repronounce the name, but very, very few people have done what you've done and actually got an experience of being there. There's a lot of detail. Give us the headlines before we get into it, Sean.
Headlines: arrived at 5 o'clock in the morning on a bus, streets empty, no taxis, a mile and a half away from the hotel. Turns out they've been under air raids all night. Eventually managed to get a taxi, blitzed their way to the hotel, crashed out for a couple of hours. What a busy day today, though. Went to visit former Russian military tanks and everything that are scattered around in Ukraine to show off what's there. Spent a fantastic interview with the mother of Juice, one of the Ukrainian pilots who sadly died last year in an accident, and also just had an immensely valuable visit. There was a children's hospital that was hit back in July, went to see that, and my goodness, had a fantastic series of discussions with a whole load of Ukrainian folk about President Trump.
Oh. And is that some stuff you're going to share with us, or is that like...
I'd love to share it if that's what you'd like to talk about.
Okay, well, I'll hand over to you. I mean, in terms of there's sort of 4 or 5 things in there that sound really interesting. Give us a little bit of a deeper dive into what you discovered.
Yeah, I mean, first thing is when you arrive in the middle of an air raid warning, the capital city of London, when you drive through it, it's always busy, 24/7. To go into a city centre and there's absolutely no cars on the road at all feels a bit surreal. But yes, they had a series of drone attacks last night. I didn't hear or see any of them, but that's the reality for KYiV. On the centre, though, I think that what's fascinating, we've seen it on the television a bit. They've got the hulks of burnt-out Russian tanks, armoured personnel carriers, and various other kit. And it looks really incongruous because there's all this modern city centre and then these burnt-out vehicles. But everybody was stopping, having a look around, and it was just a stark reminder to everybody there's a war going on. You might be stuck in a capital city. You might feel that it's a million miles away. But what this did was showed people, and everybody I spoke to was using some of their money, some of their spare time to send stuff to the front line. Because unlike our soldiers, their soldiers are having to buy their own body armor, buy their own bullets, and this was just really good reminder to everybody that they are in the middle of war, even though when I went around KYiV, it was really difficult to find anywhere that had been damaged by the war.
And did you feel any fear on the streets as you walked around?
No, I mean, what's interesting, both in Lviv and here in KYiV, I had air raid warnings go off. The air raid warnings talk to you, get to the basement quickly. And of course, I looked around. Now, I'm used to a little bit of this anyway from operational tours, but I looked around and not one single person batted an eyelid or made their way to any basement. They basically have got used to the warnings now, and they just go around their daily lives. If they get caught out, they get caught out. But do I see any panic? No. I mean, clearly a lot of people have left the city, particularly with families and young children. Those who are left, frankly, their resolve has been stiffened. And most of them that I talked to, in fact, all of the ones I talked to, it's small numbers, I grant you, were just angry. They were absolutely determined that Putin was going to be punished for his brutal invasion of Ukraine.
And were there families on the streets, parents,
yeah, there were.
Kids,
Yeah, there were the kids around. I mean, in the city centre, I was driven around. I'd paid for a cameraman to follow me around just because I wanted to capture some of it for our channel. And I honestly, and if they hadn't taken me to accident damage, I would not have known it had happened at all. And as a result, there were families on the streets. You go into the shops, they're fully packed. There were cafes spilling out onto the roads outside. There were traffic jams. It was just a normal hustle and bustle of the city, and certainly no sense of panic whatsoever, more a definite sense of resolve.
And you've had a meal tonight, Sean. So confess, did it contain cabbage?
No.
You didn't have. Go on.
Well, after I literally, because the coach journey from Lviv last night was overnight, and I'm not good at sleeping in a coach, bouncing around, packed next to somebody. And of course, it stops every couple of hours to let people off. So I didn't really get any sleep last night. Got in at 5, had 2 hours, managed to get 2 hours. So by the end of today, the massive activities today, I was just knackered. So I had room service and had a burger and chips. I'm not proud of it, but yeah, I wasn't going to experiment with food tonight. I just wanted a plate of familiar food before the batteries ran empty.
It wasn't at McDonald's, was it?
No, it was the hotel here. I'm at the Intercontinental, which is where most of the press stay. Interestingly, at 5 a.m, there was somebody, an American, a journalist at the desk checking out. When I had breakfast this morning, there was a Sky News producer who I hadn't met before, but came up and introduced herself. And there was another Sky presenter who was in the hotel earlier today. So it is quite a busy hotel, particularly for foreign correspondents. But yeah, they've got some good food here as well. So at the end of a busy day, I indulged.
Okay, so you managed to get some time with Juice's mother. It's amazing that she offered to give her time to talk to you. What was that like?
Again, odd days, maybe it was because I was tired, but moved to tears by the end of the day. I mean, she described Juice's life, his passing. She described in graphic detail how he passed, but also what most inspiring, his legacy. He was a free thinker. He was challenging the norm. She kept talking about all of these generals who just sat around and just didn't want to do anything. And I thought, yeah, okay, I was one of those generals, wasn't I? But of course, she was talking about the Ukrainian Air Force. She then took me at the end of that, took me to his resting place, which is on a sort of wall of heroes. There's a few sort of staged areas where heroes of Ukraine are passed. And Juice has got his a sort of little patch there, his pictures up. I lit a candle for him. There's a book there. And she talked about it not being a place of sadness, but a place of inspiration. And I honestly, sometimes you find yourself going, what's life about? She was so proud of what he achieved, that he had inspired a nation, that he had stood up not only to the Russians, but also to his own Ukrainian people, trying to make life better, and was now hailed as one of the heroes of KYiV. And you do look at your own life and wonder, I wonder how much all of us have got to learn, that, what is our legacy? What are we leaving behind? And it had a few, silent moments there. I've got some great footage that we'll share, but it was truly humbling. And also the number of people who were just walking past, filing past this grave and chatting to Lilia. It was just a very moving experience.
And how long ago was he lost, Sean?
He passed away, I think it was back in September last year, about a year ago. I think that was August. It was 25th of August last year. In unfortunately not in live combat. It was in a 2 aircraft struck each other during a training mission. By all accounts, there were all of the 3 pilots ejected, but it sounded tragically like they were too low, and therefore all passed away. But I think it marks that the war is having immense casualties from Ukrainian side, and this was just one mother talking about her son, but it was typical of the loss that many in Ukraine are feeling, and the likes of which we hope we'll never have to face. And I think there's lessons there as well. They're fighting the Russians. If the Russians prevail in Ukraine, where next?
And you took a helmet over, Sean. What was the helmet for, and what's happened to it so far?
Yeah, so although friends bantered me I should take a helmet for me, In fact, we took a flying helmet across for Yulia, Juice's mum, through a mutual friend and colleagues. We managed to find an old RAF flying helmet, stripped it down, repainted it, and I will put a picture up on socials for it. But it had a Ukrainian flag, a British flag, Juice's call sign, and the MiG-29 silhouette on it from his time. Really as a gift to Yulia, more because I think Juice wasn't just an inspiration for Ukrainians, he was also an inspiration to the West. How you fight against the odds, you haven't got the sort of equipment that Russia had, and yet still they bravely fought on. And I think there's some really profound lessons for all of us. Yulia was in tears. She absolutely loved the gift. And actually, it's probably going to go into the Ukrainian museum because they'll put it as pride of place as one of their artifacts there. So thanks to all the guys who put it together, Neil, Stu, and Adi, who all of which worked in incredibly tight timelines to get this thing sorted, and amazingly it survived the journey out. So job well done.
I mean, positive memories are very important to us as we move forward in life, and I guess by the sound of it, despite it being about a very sad issue for Juice's mother, this will be a positive memory for her as she lives on.
Yeah, and I think what best captured that was stood at the graveside. I looked at her and asked her, she goes there every day. And I said, what's your overwhelming sense? Is it sadness? She said, no. I look up, I think he's up there looking down. But also I'm just admire how much he packed in his time. And I was just genuinely struck by how that has implications for all of us, all of our lives, and what we do. And they were very grateful that, Red Matrix had helped them make this visit happen, that I was out there with them. And I said, yeah, but in the same sort of way, I'm just trying to make our little bit of difference. We're trying to make a difference with Red Matrix. Everybody has to find their way of trying to make a difference in life. And I think it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. And I think in Juice's case, it certainly did.
Yeah, what can I say? What an experience. So, Sean, Donald Trump.
Yeah, I thought I'd drop that one in. And one of the questions I've been asking everybody over here is, what do they think of the potential for Donald Trump to take the presidency? Because he's very keen on, I can do a deal, 24 hours, it'll be done. And the answer wasn't quite what I expected. But they effectively answered in a civil manner, but within a minute were very angry. And their answer basically said, we've been fighting Russians for 300 years. They keep having a go at us, we keep fighting them back. Keep having a go at us, we keep fighting back. And 30 years ago, we had nuclear weapons that could stop Russia on their tracks. But you, the West, you coerced us, persuaded us to sign the Budapest memo, give up these nuclear weapons, guarantee of our sovereignty for the rest of our time. 20 years later, Putin rips up that bit of paper and the West doesn't step in. So against that backdrop, why are we going to accept some American suddenly walking in and saying, I'll do a deal in 24 hours? That isn't going to solve anything when it comes to the Ukrainian perspective. They are very disparaging about the Russians. And it's not today's generation, it's 300 years of it. They are determined. It's a different conversation as to what they believe their hope is. But that whole prospect of what President Trump appears to stand for, that makes them very angry.
And did they have any comments to make about the level of financial support and some of the changes that have happened, some of the dilution that's happened in the last couple of months? Has that sort of news filtered to them, or?
Yeah, I mean, the most interesting bit I found, the question I was asked the most was, why is the West not letting us use weapons on Russian territory? Russia is striking us regularly. Why can't we strike back? And the trouble is, I know the answer to that, but I couldn't articulate it in a way that made sense when you're actually in Ukraine.
No, quite. I'm feeling it here. You know, I've got 4 or 5 sort of points to make about what you've just said, but how would it help?
No, and I mean, without boring with how I answered it, but it was consistently one of those that they just couldn't understand the logic. They genuinely feel they're fighting Russia on behalf of everybody else because they believe that Russia's on an expansionist regime, and if they finish with Ukraine, where next? They are hugely grateful. I mean, literally teary-eyed hugs, grateful for the support the West provides. There's no question about that. But they just can't understand the logic of why wouldn't you let us use these? And so it'd be interesting to see what happens in the near future with the US decision about whether those restrictions might relent. We'll see.
Well, we're only weeks away from the big election in the US. And even though whoever wins, it'll be 3 months before they actually take office. Not much is going to happen in that, a couple of months, actually. So, yeah, no, I can understand exactly how they feel. And it's no point posing any counter arguments to them. These are feelings and they're deep rooted. And as you've said, they have lasted generations. You can't top that.
No, and the other question I asked them was because I was intrigued that so many millions have fled Ukraine, and yet people are staying there to fight to the end. How do they feel about people who've run away? And it's interesting. Again, they give a superficial answer initially that it's everybody's choice. I don't feel bad feeling. But actually, when you push it, they do understand that families who want the best for their children, who are worried about them, but there's quite a lot of anger around that people who fled, what are they going to do when the war's over? Are they going to come back? Can they come back knowing the sacrifices that their fellow countrymen made? And it was almost like one of them used the example that somebody had said, oh, this war wasn't for them, so they ran away. And the soldier said, it wasn't for me either. My mother didn't have me to go to war, but the war is thrust upon us. We have to protect our way of life. And if that means laying down our life, I mean, I understand the pacifist bit, but it's creating some really interesting dynamics, even within families. And you do wonder when the war is over, how they'll be reconciled, because Ukraine is paying an immensely high price for this war.
Okay, Sean. Well, it's a bit later where you are than it is here. So we're going to say cheerio in a minute. But before we go, I got four questions for you.
Oh.
And if you can use your adeptness to give a very quick answer to all 4 of them.
Got it.
I'll give you marks out of 10 at the end.
Uh-oh.
What was the most shocking thing you saw or experienced today?
Probably the tank burnt out in KYiV, because it was completely incongruous with a center, a modern city center. Yeah. And when you opened the hatch, that was meant to be one of the safest places in the world, and it was completely burnt out.
Wow. That's good. Thank you. Yeah. Second is, what was the most emotional?
That was simple. That was standing by Juice's grave. I can feel myself welling up now. It was just a quiet moment at the end of the day, but it wasn't Juice. It was the fact it brought back memories of so many of my colleagues that I have lost over the years. And it was just, you push these things to the back of your head, in a quiet moment, it all came rushing back.
My third question, I suppose in a way you might have answered it. I'll ask it anyway, which is, what was the saddest part of the day?
It wasn't really sad with Juice. I have to say, I think it was that was more because Lilia was so uplifting. It was very good. I think probably the saddest moment was just a little moment with Lilia when I said, because my son is in the military, and I said, I I can't put myself in your shoes. And she looked at me and her eyes just started to water and she said, don't even try to.
No. Thank you for that. And we'll end on a better note. What was your happiest moment today?
Do you know, I think it was walking out this morning out of the hotel and seeing the bright sunshine, the sun on your face, two Ukrainians, a driver and one of the military guys with me, chatting away, and the street was full of people bustling away, just going about their lives. And all of before I came out, it was, you're going to KYiV, we're going to be careful. There was an air raid sign the night before. Actually, it was just a city ticking along as normal, bathed in sunshine, felt completely normal.
Mm-hmm. Sean, well done. We're going to wish you a good night. Get some sleep.
I need it. Thanks a lot, Ben.
Cheers.
Ciao.